Hello and good morning. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about Ozumat, which is the typically people play as like the final boss of Throne of the Tides. And this fight is quite challenging in typical pugs, but once you get like a grasp as to like how to deal with the mechanics, I think that this fight becomes a lot easier. I do believe that visual clarity is typically a pretty large challenge on this boss. And if you actually have your particle density down as low as it can possibly go, the boss goes from having this like gigantic gunk effect underneath his character, like you see on screen here, to having nothing. And so I'm going to link this weak aura down below that basically reduces your particle density with the moment that the boss gets pulled. This allows for you to be able to see like what's underneath the boss easier and make sure that it allows you to drop your blotting barrages easier. So let's talk about the boss, kind of like why it's hard and what like groups can do and why this boss is like a pug killer, like what you should be looking to do in this fight. So basically, what I've seen become a problem, and there's basically two things. First thing that becomes a problem for groups, maybe it's three things, but first thing that becomes a problem for groups is that people are not really willing to be stacked with these circles. You don't necessarily want to stack on top of one another, but you want to be like creating a Venn diagram where everybody is close enough to one another to where, I mean, honestly, we're all inside the barrier there, and we're dropping our blotting barrages. Then, second point that you need to be watching out for is the cleaning phase. And so whenever you get the circles, you actually drop gunk on the ground and it slowly will expand, dealing damage to you if you're standing in it. But every so often, Neptulon will cast this channel onto players and allow you to cleanse the room. And so that's actually kind of where the weak aura comes in handy, where if we had these large graphics, it would be kind of difficult to tell where the gunk ends and like how much more we need to clean. And so cleaning the room is actually a bit weird because it happens in pulses. It's not necessarily just a static thing. And so like in addition to it happening in pulses, you need to make sure that the room gets cleaned. If you end up missing any of the old gunk, then it is nearly, if not completely impossible for you to completely come back and be able to re-clean the room to a perfect state, meaning that melee are going to get forced out. That's why the first, I would say, 2 or 3 cleans of the room are the most important. Then beyond that, it does get a little bit easier. Most groups lust this boss. That's fairly common. But as long as you get like the first couple of cleanses and get them perfect, it's not going to be a problem. The third issue on this fight that I see sometimes is that you kill the ads or you kill the sludges or the splotches or whatever in a bad spot. What you want to do is you actually want to kill them either underneath the boss or as close to the boss as possible, and that way people can then drop their blotting barrage up against the edge of where these splotches and ads have died. This is maybe a little bit more relevant on like the second and third wave of ads that actually overlaps with like the circles. But even for this one, look at where we have our puddles dropped. It's kind of similar to where we had the blotting barrage circles dropped. And now everybody's grouped up against the edge of the blotting barrage. And then that allows us, I mean, while we did take a lot of damage there, it does allow us to have a good clean whenever we need to. And so this is why it's actually kind of important that we had a perfect clean the first time, because the second clean, if we had any of the gunk remaining, you would not be able to clean it up in time because your room is actually pretty heavily infested with all this gunk right here. And so now we're making sure that we're trying to get... First off, I think we're just prioritizing getting melee cleaned up because we actually see that the boss is kind of low. But we do get everything cleaned up, and the last tick off of my character was the tick that ended up cleaning the final amount of gunk that was underneath the ground. And so that's kind of why it's so important that you get it cleaned rapidly. That's also why this boss is a pretty big pug killer. But yeah, that's basically how the fight should look. I've seen groups where they mess up their cleaning phase, or they're not aggressively trying to group the blot. And the biggest tip for this fight is literally just to aggressively group the blot. I'm going to link this weak aura down in the description, so you guys can also check that out. And I really do hope this helps. This boss is not particularly easy. I would make sure that you kind of have lust for it, even if this means you go Ozumat third or go Ozumat fourth. Just kind of tailoring your strategy of what boss you're going to be going third or fourth based around having lust is definitely going to increase your success rate in pugs. But overall, this is certainly one of the harder fights just conceptually, and it becomes increasingly difficult for pug groups to be able to do it perfectly. I hope this all helps, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.